Hello and welcome to the Squeaky Wheel podcast. We speak with leading influencers about policy, industry and more across cycling, walking and all other forms of micromobility. My name is Phil Latz and I've been squeaking about various cycling media and charity activities for over 40 years.
And I'm Irene, co-founder of the cycling technology and data company C-Sense. And we're on a mission to help cities transform for more cycling and micro-mobility using data.
We're bringing you this podcast a week later than scheduled because I'm just back from Taipei Cycle, which I'll say more about at the end of the podcast.
Today we are excited to be speaking with Kirsty Kelly. Since 2019, Kirsty has been CEO of the AITPM, the Australian Institute of Traffic Planning and Management. For those of you not aware, this is Australia's peak professional membership organisation for transport planners, traffic and transport engineers, road and public transport infrastructure designers, and related professions. In other words, Kirsty's members plan, design and build all of the roads, rails, ports and airports that you see and use every day. Now, you'd naturally expect that these members who work for the big end of town would be natural advocates for building more of the same. But they've recently drafted and endorsed a remarkable policy issues paper that is truly groundbreaking, and that is what we'll be asking Kirsty more about today. So Kirsty, welcome very much to the Squeaky Wheel podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So let's jump straight into your new report. Firstly, what is its title and how did you come to produce it?
Yes, so this paper is one that was put together with our members. So as you mentioned before, we cover the breadth of the transport professions. So it's called The Path to Net Zero, Decarbonising Australia's Transport System. So it's our first policy issues paper covering a wide range of issues around decarbonising transport in Australia.
Brilliant. And so I think that 4 of the key recommendations were around avoid, shift, improve and lead. Could you summarise for me what those 4 areas really mean?
Yeah, so it's the hierarchy really of the things that we need to do in terms of decarbonising Australia's transport system. So the first around avoid is really around looking at a range of recommendations that help us to reduce the need to travel, so reducing the need to generate those emissions. And those are things around smarter planning and integrated transport and land use planning. So looking at creating neighbourhoods where people don't need to use vehicles to get what they need on a daily basis, essentially. The shift is around shifting modes. So looking to shift where possible trips to more sustainable modes, so whether that be public transport or by active transport and micro-mobility, so walking, cycling, scooting, and a range of other sorts of things. And so looking at that shifting and supporting people around behaviour change to make those shifts. Mm-hmm. Improve then comes down to the things that we need to do to vehicles to improve things like vehicle efficiency standards or emissions generated through other types of transport. So looking at low carbon materials, how we manage and monitor transport systems, so that's improve. And then lead is really looking more broadly at those governance issues and leadership issues around decarbonisation as a whole. So issues around things like decision making, carbon budgets, and that kind of thing. So our platform is really around those 4 key areas and looking at how transport can assist in decarbonising.
Yeah. So I love that it's a really integrated approach, starting first with avoiding that need to travel all those distances in the first place. It seems such a simple concept, but actually that's fundamental to get the planning right, isn't it? And then so much can then flow from there, and then the behaviour change, and it's a very integrated approach and probably quite different to how things have been thought about in the past.
Yeah, and look, a lot of the issues, particularly around the avoid and shift, have a range of benefits as well. So it isn't just around reducing carbon, but reducing the need for long distance car travel, getting people onto bikes and walking around in their neighbourhood to get what they need, also improves public health, improves well-being. That ability to walk to things in your neighbourhood can have economic benefits for the local community. So there are a range of other other factors around this. So a lot of the recommendations in our policy paper don't just deliver sort of decarbonisation benefits, they have broader community benefits, so social, economic and environmental.
That's wonderful.
Yes, well, to me it's remarkable, and most of our listeners I'm sure would agree with all 4 of your recommendations. But the remarkable thing to me is your organisation is full of members who make their living by planning and designing and building Australia's biggest roads. And as part of this, they're advocating to build fewer of them in future. And I'm just wondering, how widely is this policy paper supported within your own membership? Was it controversial, hard to get through?
Yeah, look, surprisingly, it wasn't that controversial. I think transport professionals, do come from a background where they understand these issues. It can be challenging, and perhaps working in large companies, dealing with clients who might have different positions on what it is that they're trying to do can be difficult for professions, and that happens in many professions. But within AITPM, there was broad support for this paper. Part of what it also says is it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be building any new infrastructure. It's around thinking about how to best do that. And what infrastructure is required, how we make better use of what we've got. Perhaps it's realigning some of those priorities towards public transport infrastructure, or if we are needing to build major infrastructure, it's ensuring that it's not just focused on the private vehicle movement, but that it also includes all of the corridors that we need for public transport, but high frequency, cycling, walking. So ensuring those things are all included as part of that. So it is a shift, and it's one that, as we're sort of looking at what's happening in the industry at the moment and more broadly in the economy and the global economy, there are some potentially big changes afoot around what's available financially for us to be able to build the various pieces of infrastructure we need. And I think that's what's great about the content that's in this policy issues paper. Is part of what it also looks at is those, low build or no build scenarios. So how do we modify what we have and make better use of it, so that when we are investing in new infrastructure, that we then put that into where it's going to have the highest benefit. So there are a lot of things that we can do at a lower cost that will deliver great benefit to a wider range of people, particularly in that walking and cycling space. And then when we do need to invest in the infrastructure, to try to shift that to places that are really going to have the greatest benefit from that. So it's not just about building a lot more roads, it's around thinking about those different types of transport that we need and where they will go.
Yeah, it's really so interesting to think about the benefits on all those different levels. And I think one of our previous guests as well, Matthew Burke, was talking about the cost of roads actually massively increasing. Just the pure cost of materials and the construction is also skyrocketing. So being able to manage finances efficiently, understanding the benefits is really critical now, isn't it, going forward? So this paper seems to really bring together a lot of that thinking. It's quite exciting.
Yeah, and look, there are significant issues around availability of materials, resources and labour as well in this country, and it varies by jurisdiction, but certainly in Queensland and places that have had significant flooding, a lot of the materials are going to just rebuilding roads for basic access for people who've had their roads in their sort of towns and regions washed away. So there are limited physical resources and also limited labour, and we're also in a housing crisis. So we're looking for the country's looking for people to build homes as well. So Queensland has Olympics, so there's a lot of construction required there as well.
A lot of constraints.
So there are a lot of constraints. So looking at how do we get better transport outcomes for communities and economies without having to use so many materials.
I was really excited when we spoke to you last, Kirsty, as well, and you mentioned that under your leadership, the women's membership of your organisation has actually grown quite a lot since you've been in place, which is quite exciting because it's something that I've heard people talk about previously. There's not enough women involved in transport, and that they can bring different perspectives that can add value. So it's really nice to see. Could you tell me a little bit more about how much has the growth been and how did you achieve that growth, and what do you see as the benefit of having more women involved?
Yeah, look, it's one of the things that we've noticed, and it's really around for the AITPM membership, with COVID, the silver lining of online activity. for us was one that enabled people to get involved in our activities and engage in webinars and attend online meetings when previously they were perhaps it was harder to attend things after hours. A lot of our activities were, evening activities, and, it is stereotypical, but a lot of our the women in the industry were, dealing with family duties and were not able to attend those. And so what we've seen is an increase in more sort of diverse audiences in webinars and daytime activity. But also transport is very broad, and transport itself, there isn't a specific transport profession. It is a mixture of transport and traffic engineers, transport planners, modelers, the active travel, demand management, people coming from, not just engineering backgrounds, but a range of other disciplines, geography, social sciences. And in those fields, there are more women. And so as transport planning as a sort of a broad activity is being undertaken more, particularly by our state governments, it's bringing in people from those other backgrounds, which is bringing in more women. So we're seeing an increased diversity in the transport professions in Australia. Also, it's very culturally diverse. So we do have a lot of people coming from other countries into Australia to practice in transport, and so it gives us a real mix, and that I think it's great because it better reflects the Australian community in terms of that breadth of people in it, and that experience, particularly taking the sort of women example, that women do move differently. There's plenty of academic studies and other industry research that show that women make a range of different trips and work differently to men. And so ensuring that we've got women in the workplace that also are able to reflect that in their own work and understand the different needs that women may have, women and girls moving around in cities and regions, that can then reflect in the everyday practice. So it's helping to break down some of those barriers and address some of the biases that have been inherent for a long time in the practice, particularly of transport and traffic engineering.
No, well, great to see. And as a recent joining member of AITPM myself, I'm happy to add to the your membership stats in
conflict of interest disclosure.
In that regard.
Shouldn't that have come up at the top of the program, Maureen?
Thanks for joining.
So no, but it's true. Signing up to the webinars and things does make it easier for women to get along to. So yeah, great.
Irene and I have both read your report, which I've got a copy in my hand right now. It runs to 30-odd pages, so we can't go into great detail. But I've picked out 6 points which I think might be of most specific interest to our readers. So, Kirsty, I'd like to just read all 6 out, just the dot points that I've written, and then you might like to comment on any or all of them at the end. So here were 6 that really struck me that are spread through the report. There's, I think, 22 recommendations or something overall. So this is not even a full recommendations. These are just 6 things that really grabbed my attention. So first was invest in and promote the shift to more sustainable transport modes, remove minimum car parking mandates and reduce car parking, review road building with a view to reducing, fund sustainable travel, including e-bike subsidies and shared mobility rebates. Disincentivise short-distance travel by private car, and governments should invest at least 20% of transport budgets in walking and cycling infrastructure compared to the current 1%. Now, Kirsty, that's a list that would make even a hardcore bike advocacy group blush. So that's pretty remarkable.
Well, look, I think they're all important things. And I should sort of clarify that with our paper, it is a policy issues paper with a series of recommendations, and we'll be working our way through identifying, we have some that are our key recommendations that we're advocating on, but it provides a resource for the transport community to use to advocate in their own workplaces and in projects around specific things that need to change, and certainly we'll be using it whenever issues come up that align with those. In terms of things around increasing investment in active transport, walking and cycling, and I know we're in alignment with many other groups in this space that we don't invest enough in that compared to what we are investing more broadly in transport and particularly in roads. A small increase in that investment can make a significant difference on the ground to walking and cycling facilities and infrastructure in communities. So that one, really is a bit of a no-brainer that if we were able to invest even a small amount more, it would make a significant difference. But certainly a lot more would definitely make a big difference. Some of the things around car parking standards and disincentivizing short trips, these are all context specific ones. So depending on where you're located, we do often have often planning regulations requirements for quite a lot of car parking for particular facilities, which continues to reinforce the dominance of the car in developments. And often we also require when we're building, and even this, in the context of wanting to bring all of these new homes in that we need to house our population, continuing to require people to build garages where we're then investing in materials and costs to house the vehicle just further entrenches the sort of value society places on the car. So reducing car parking standards, particularly in retail and commercial areas where we've then got public transport, we've got walking and cycling, encourages people to walk and cycle. If you know that you're going somewhere and it's hard to get a car park, but it's easier to jump on the bus or ride your bike or walk there, it encourages you to do that. So it's something that we need to work on at a local level, understanding where to best implement these sorts of changes, but they are certainly happening in a range of cities around the country and certainly overseas. In terms of some of those other recommendations in reducing building, there's a range of ways in that no build, looking at how can we turn around sweating the assets. We've got a lot of transport infrastructure out there. How can we use that more wisely rather than investing in building more, building bigger, which takes materials and carbon to do that construction? How do we better use the existing facilities? That's certainly something that we are advocating for, and really reviewing the investment in some of the major infrastructure to really check to see, does this really stack up with what we're trying to do, or would we be able to achieve similar or better outcomes through other types of investment? Incentives around things like e-bikes and encouraging people to use micro-mobility also is a good way, and often it's relative to building major infrastructure, it's a low-cost way of getting people out of cars and onto other modes.
Well done. You've got a memory like an elephant, Kirsty. I think
there were a lot of things in that list. I was thinking, what else was there?
Yeah.
No,
Maybe you should be kinder, Phil, and break it down, like release one point at a time. You like to test, I guess.
I never doubted her, Irene.
Just curious, out of those parts of the reports, were there any areas that were maybe harder to get endorsed by your members, or are there any particularly some that you want to highlight that you're really proud of as well?
Look, I think there's one in there around instigating an Australian roads review. So that one came about, and particularly, I think you both are aware, and I'm sure many of your listeners are, that Lee Waters from Wales, a Welsh parliamentarian, came to Australia last year and spoke at our conference, but also in a number of locations around the country, including
on the Squeaky Wheel podcast.
Yes, on the Squeaky Wheel. Excellent. Yes, and in Parliament House in Canberra. And talking about the Welsh experience, they put in place a number of changes there, including default urban speed limit reductions, but also what they had as the Welsh Roads Review. And that's where they really looked at their list of infrastructure projects and re-examined them through a different lens to look at, what are these pieces of infrastructure really what we need. And so we've proposed a similar approach within our paper, and I think that's one that we're very keen to see happen. It is a different context in Australia with, the level of, particularly around roads and regional roads, significant size of our country makes some of these things difficult, but it is definitely one that we would like to see.
It's quite exciting, isn't it? Because if we do achieve that in Australia, what a mindset shift that would actually be mean, to think that a country of our size, it's maybe easy to think, well, we can just keep building more roads because we've got plenty of space, but to actually take that step back and reevaluate that, I think that's, as you say, would be a really big mindset shift and a big achievement if we're able to get that as a result of the report.
Yeah. And look, one of the things that, and then I think it really resonated with me in talking with Lee last year, was around the need to do things differently. And this particularly comes to our engineering colleagues around there has been a tendency to rely a lot on or an adherence to standards and guidelines and policies, and some of the things that perhaps are guidelines but are applied rigidly rather than looking at the different sort of use scenarios. And one of the things that he talked about in Wales was the scenario of really looking at changing the design of some of the roads and road environments that they were working with to reduce sizes, reduce speeds, which had multiple positive impacts around, reducing the cost of projects because you're not using as much pavement, reducing the environmental impacts because you aren't using as much pavement, slowing the speeds down, which enabled people to have environments that also supported walking and cycling and public transport, as well as high speed or vehicles, reducing the speed down, supported that in a safer environment. So that also then promotes health. And what he talked about was the opportunity that it gave the engineering profession to look at these issues as, from a problem solving perspective and to be creative about the solutions to these issues. So that's one of the things that we've been talking about at AITPM, is that we need our professionals from all the transport disciplines to think creatively about the problems that we're facing as a society and the things that we need to work on, and how can we work collaboratively within the transport professions, but also with a range of other professions, and looking at evidence to see how we can come up with alternative solutions that can help address some of the problems. Because consistently applying some of the standards that we've have had for a long time, or the guidelines, sometimes they are not fit for purpose in terms of sort of major highway standards being used in street building. So there's some of the issues that are being discussed around the country now around, well, which processes should we be using for designing residential streets? And we're seeing guidelines coming out from different locations. New South Wales, with the design of roads and streets, is coming up soon.
But that's great, because AITPM was involved in bringing over someone like Lee Waters, for example, and you're almost helping to stimulate those new thoughts and the ideas, and then that leads to then reflecting on, well, actually, are our standards fit for purpose? So you have a really important role here in seeding this change, which is really positive.
Yeah, and look, that really is a key part of our role. So, we don't write and set standards and guidelines, but for us, identifying people that can come and talk to us about how we might do it differently, or working with universities to identify the issues that we might be able to consider differently. I mean, it hasn't been published yet, but it will be, I think, by the time this podcast goes live. But we've got Professor Peter Norton from University of Virginia speaking in a session with us in about 2 months' time, in conjunction with the Heart Foundation. So, looking at bringing different ideas and perspectives into the Australian transport community, and helping to challenge us and inspire us to think differently about what we're doing.
Okay. So what's the feedback been like since you released your report? And what's next for you in the AITPM?
Yeah, so positive feedback on this report, and the process we're actually in at the moment. We've had an expression of interest out to our members to take this report to the next steps. So we're forming some working groups to dive into some of the key recommendations in a greater level of detail. And so we'll be looking to publish some further white papers and smaller policy pieces this year to examine some of those in more detail, as well as launching a CPD program to ensure that our members are across the range of topics.
Jargon alert,
CSCP,
CPD.
continuing professional development. So a series of generally online webinars to make sure that people have got access to the knowledge that they need on these topics.
Excellent.
The other area that we are working on is around inclusive mobility. So we have a series of working groups looking at a range of topics there around social inclusion, equity, accessibility, and and safety. So we have a number of both policy pieces and further professional development going on with those as well. So that two really sort of important areas that are keeping the profession busy and delivering important outcomes for communities, which is, transport is so fundamental to daily life. So making sure that everyone's got good access to what they need and can move sustainably is really important.
Okay. I guess coming to the end of our time for this discussion, something we always like to do is just to ask you, is there anything that we've missed that you would like to specifically comment on before we wrap up?
Look, I think thank you for the opportunity, and I think that the work that you both do is really important, and being able to have these conversations and bring different people together is key. The transport community is really broad and covers a range of areas and people working in different sectors, local government, state government, federal government, consulting, the range of sort of detailed modelling. There are a lot of different people working in this space. And I think the thing I'd like to flag really is that while transport is fundamental, and everyone moves, almost everyone moves somewhere every day, or they receive goods and services that have moved to them. So it is very fundamental. We often don't, surprisingly, sort of talk about what's needed with transport. So we'll, in the media, we'll talk about problems like congestion, but we're often not digging down and listening to the people who are the professionals in this space. And often people in transport professions aren't the loudest talkers in the room. So they're not the sort of big voices and advocates that are out there from some other professions. So really what we're looking to do is, through things like this policy work, start to raise the awareness of the role that transport professionals play in delivering transport systems. So
especially in context of a federal election, happening within weeks, there's maybe, as you say, not enough talk about what's happening with transport and what could be done.
Yes.
Especially in context of net zero and what we're trying to achieve. Because, I think from memory, transport is making up about 30% of the CO2 emissions globally, at least. I'm not sure the Australian stat. So there's definitely a huge opportunity for transport to be making a big dent in this area. And so you're saying, it does deserve a stronger voice.
It does deserve a stronger voice. And it is challenging because road funding has always been a big thing at a federal level. Parties love announcing new roads. So it's always, highway upgrades and those kind of things are always very popular on the list. Things like walking and cycling, not so much. And so, we've supported Better Streets, have got their campaign out,
yes,
and other groups around supporting an increased funding in walking and cycling, and consistent with our policy platform. So we've lent our voice to that. AITPM is not an advocacy organisation, so we're very sort of clear that we won't be engaging in that heavily political advocacy. That's not who we are. We are representing a range of professions, but we will be advocating to governments and more working with particularly state and local governments to ensure that the knowledge and capacity is there around these issues. But we're sort of not going to engage with the political party cycle, but we certainly want to make sure that these issues are out there and that we're thinking about things differently. And there's a lot to do.
Well, that absolutely makes sense. And what you've done with this report has provided a great resource that raises the need for an integrated approach to everything around transport. And it's wonderful that you pulled so much research and ideas and stimulating thoughts and recommendations into one-stop shop document that's definitely going to have a huge ability to inspire and inform going forward.
Absolutely. I think it's a remarkable document. So congratulations, Kirsty. And you might not be one of those loud voices you mentioned. You're very quietly spoken, but unbelievable wisdom there. So Kirsty Kelly, thanks for squeaking.
No, thank you for having me. And I can't take full credit for this paper. It was written by a group of very dedicated and excellent professionals. So we had a working group, and they really were the authors of this, and the membership and the board supported it. So it's a team effort.
Well, even better.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Irene, Kirsty's a very quietly spoken lady, but my goodness, she's got a lot of wisdom there, I think. I was super impressed by what she had to say. And, perhaps she shouldn't be so locked away in a professional organisation. Perhaps she should be Minister for Transport or whatever. What do you think?
Well, that'd be nice, because then we'd have a 20% transport budget for which we'd all like to see, wouldn't we? No, it's a really groundbreaking report, as I said, to being able to pull. I mean, obviously there's lots of good ideas they've been able to pull together from lots of different areas. I think they've got some of the best practice approach, and definitely this avoid, shift, improve is key to that. And then also this lead part as well, about being able to actually introduce everything and make the decision making flow and be effective is an important element at the end as well.
Absolutely. And the fact that they're not an advocacy, they're not some group of ratbag radicals, as their opponents might like to call some advocacy groups, but this is the peak professional body saying this. And so that surely carries a lot of weight.
Yeah. And what I loved as well is, how she talked a lot about how the transport profession is changing and taking in more people from different skill sets. So it's not just engineering now. There's also, people coming in from different areas, even behavioural change becoming a feature.
Yes, and the ethnic diversity was fascinating too. That's great as well. People coming from perhaps denser countries in terms of population and already more efficient ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we might roll on to our final section of each podcast, which is What's Up, where we update our listeners on what we might be doing or planning to do, or any interesting things we've come across in the past month. So what's up, Irene?
Oh, for me, I'm just planning out some of the conferences in Australia over the next few months. So I'll be down in Sydney for Mobility 2025, which is an ITS Australia conference. I'm going to be speaking and presenting at that. And then I'm going to be at Kirsty's conference, the AITPM conference, which is held in September. And then there's another one for this Australasian Road Safety Conference over in Perth later in the year. So I've got full agenda of conferences in Australia. And for me, I've not been to any of these before. I'm usually doing ones in Europe or the UK. So it's exciting for me to check all of these out. Yeah, we're recruiting a business development person for C-Sense on the other side of the world that can start attending all of the stuff over that side as well. So I probably should have mentioned that on the last podcast, but probably by the time this goes out, it will be filled.
Well, I hope so. Good luck.
But yeah, it's important to keep our profile up on both sides now that I'm down here. But yeah, hoping we get a great person in the role for that. Yeah, and otherwise just busy with a couple more new projects we won, which hopefully we can put out and announce soon as well.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I've been lucky enough to attend a couple of the AITPM conferences, one in Sydney, one in Melbourne, and one in Perth. Not in full, but at least in part in a couple of cases. And it is an excellent conference.
Okay.
And when we first went to Perth, as part of We Ride Australia with Peter Burke and Stephen Hodgson, we went with a bit of trepidation, wondering how these road engineer guys might accept these bicycle people. And we were welcomed with open arms. It was a fantastic experience, and they couldn't have made us more welcome. And we actually had a one-day cycling specific or active transport specific seminar the day before the conference proper, which was sold out. So it was fantastic.
It is interesting because I have been at some events, and transport engineers can be nervous sometimes about engaging with advocacy groups. Especially some that have been on the sharp end of community consultation discussions and things that can not necessarily saying this the the advocacy groups on both sides can be vocal. So I guess there's some natural trepidation sometimes for people who just go, hey, I'm just implementing a planning guideline, which was, as Kirsty said, just the existing guideline. So they're, she's talking about it from another level of how do we rethink some of those guidelines and change that. Yeah, I'm excited to go and check out.
Yeah, I think
conference.
the culture comes from the top, and I think Kirsty probably can claim a bit of credit, not that she probably would, in setting that more friendly culture. So I think you'll enjoy it. So if that's all your what's
yes,
up,
over
Irene?
to you. I think yours is going to be far more exciting this episode,
Phil. Of course.
Unleash it. Come on. Tell us about your exciting, windswept and interesting travels.
Well, I've got 4 points which partly interrelate, but as we said in the intro, I've just come back from Taipei Cycle, which I consider to be the second most important global show in the world after Eurobike, which I'll be going to in late June, 25th to the 27th of June, I'll be there. So it was interesting test riding a bunch of new bikes, and the e-drive systems just keep getting better and better, smaller, lighter, quieter, cheaper. I think the e-bike revolution has got a long way to go. Like, these are not totally radically different, but there's a lot of improvement still going on. There's a lot of growth in e-bikes still to come. You can get a bit like the frog in the saucepan. You can get complacent sometimes and not realize that you're in the middle of something really quite big. And then secondly, I went to SRAM, SRAM. SRAM's the second biggest bicycle component manufacturer in the world after Shimano. And I went to their main factory in Taiwan, which overall they employ about 3,500 people. I think there's 1,000 to 1,500 in this particular factory. And it was fascinating to see how they're so frugal, not in a unproductive or tight way, but every resource, space and energy and so on. When I went there 8 years ago, they had conveyor belts everywhere. They've got rid of that, and people are working closer together and physically handing the components from one to the other. And they're using gravity-fed, not conveyors, but slides. If you imagine something that's just rolling down a sloping slide with a cable tie and a counterweight going up in the other direction. So imagine a pair of suspension forks are put on the top of the slope. They slide down to where they need to go. Meanwhile, the counterweight's going up. When the person at the bottom takes the fork off, the counterweight slides back down, taking the cradle for the fork up to from whence it came. Just fascinating innovations like that. It's really so much thought goes into that factory, and they're investing over $500 million on a brand new factory in Taiwan that will combine 3 existing factories, plus I think their R&D center into one facility. And I did ask, what if China drops a bomb on it? And my host said, that's not going to happen. Japan and South Korea will come to our aid. So I hope they're right, because that's about 800 million Australian dollars they're investing.
What about the tariffs back into the US then?
Well, who knows? What day is it today, Irene? What's the tariff percentage today?
I was just Googling it. I think it was said like 2 days ago it was 10%, but there.
Yeah, it's 10% worldwide at the moment on a 90-day pause. So who knows? Who knows? Anyway, rolling on, I went to a great event that the city of Sydney hosted about a week ago with Roxanne DeBow, who knows you, so obviously you know her.
I do know her, yes.
Because we had dinner with a smaller group after the event, a remarkable advocate and organisation builder, and would be a great podcast guest. So watch this space, Irene.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. I did get to know her a little bit because she was an Australian working over in the UK in cycling. So, of course, we have a bit in common. Talking to her as well, we bizarrely both work for Accenture, the management consulting firm, before going into what we're doing, which is a kind of unusual route. So yeah, it's really inspiring. I think I've seen quite a lot of her presentations on, there's a weekly forum. It used to be called Ideas with Beers. I think it's been renamed something more sensible now. It doesn't have beers. It's a place where advocates come together and share different things that they've been working on. And Roxy always has some great stories coming out of Cambridge, but also she was really open to listening to what others are doing and bringing in those ideas as well. So
yes, so watch this space, as I say. And then lastly, I listened to the Yarra Bug podcast, which I don't know if you've come across. It's a community radio program on Melbourne 3CR radio, but also put out as a podcast. And I've been aware of this for a couple of years now. There's a project in Hobart, the CBD of Hobart, Collins Street Protected Bike Lanes. And as you would expect, probably shouldn't be, but it is very controversial. Oh, heaven forbid, because it involves taking away a couple of car parking spaces, probably more than a couple, but you know what I mean. And so the business lobby group, which unfortunately is against this project, got enough signatures to force a public meeting about the issue, which they had at the Hobart Town Hall. And according to the podcast, and I've since verified, the city of Hobart claims that 1,000 people showed up for that meeting. The vast majority, at least 90% plus, were in favour of the protected bike lanes. And so the motions passed at that meeting were strongly in favour of continuing and expanding the program and so forth. And out of that too, a grassroots group has formed called Streets People Love Hobart. And it's interesting that CamCycle was actually formed, I heard from Roxy's presentation, many years ago when they tried to ban cycling from the centre of the city of Cambridge. CamCycle is short for Cambridge Cycle. So out of that emerged the organisation that she's now the CEO of, which now has about 6 full-time staff. It's a remarkably successful organisation for a relatively small city. So the moral of the story is that groups form out of pressure, a bit like perhaps igneous rocks, if you're into geology, form out of volcanic pressure, or diamonds for that matter, form out of pressure. So it's interesting to see how these groups form when the pressure's on and they're up against the wall. And so that is my What's Up. So that's all for this month. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. It's on all your favourite platforms. And we'll be back next month with another exciting guest.
And also, if you are enjoying the podcast, we really appreciate you to give us a little review and maybe share it with your friends as well. Help get the word out. Particularly this episode with Kirsty Kelly. I think it's been fantastic. So thanks again, everybody. And we look forward to catching up with you next month.
Until then, make sure you just keep squeaking.